Hello, world. Today's podcast is about indigenous wisdom and cryptocurrencies. And I want to start today's second edition of this live video podcast with a tiny bit of an awkward joke that you might have heard already. And it goes like, money, 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 always funny in a rich man's world. So we're going to riff off that tiny bit of the ABBA song later on in our dialogue with Mila and Franz. And before introducing my guests, my personal 2 cents on money. I don't know how many of you are aware that money truly is a social construct, and the monetary system that we're living in now is not even 50 years old. And before that, the system did not even survive 100 years. So actually, monetary systems have like life cycles. So in as much as now, many of us believe that the underlying structure, the scaffolding, the architecture of money is pretty much as it is. I would question that and definitely put out there into the room in between the three of us, but also sharing with you, the audience, how not one monetary system, but monetary systems can be designed, and also take a look into the future and really ask ourselves, what would our world look like if in 10 years only from now, there would be a multitude of monetary systems serving different purposes. Some are local, bioregional, some on a more national, and some on an international level. So with that 2 cents from my side, I would like to have Mila introduce herself and sketch a little bit her biography and what made her meet us in this room together. Mila.
Thank you, Alistair. So my first words would be from an Indigenous perspective, which is hello, my other selves, hello, my relations. And introducing myself that way then allows me to relate to you from spiritual being, human being, and all kinds of beings. So my background is I'm originally Indonesian, but I left when I was very young. My father and my grandparents lived in a village in the middle of nowhere, up in the mountains with no running water, no electricity. So money was not something that was, let's say, in abundance. It was very much that the abundance was living off the land. And from that, I used to live in so many different countries since I was 3. But we would go back to that village and I would have to learn how to live with my cousins, doing number 1 and number 2 in the river. And basically what my life was all about was the bias of impermanence and change, constant change, because I just went from one country to another because of how my parents were brought up. They were diplomats. And so I moved from one country to another every few years and had to learn new languages, new cultures. And it just informed my life of change and impermanence. And that also went through to my disciplines, from engineering to technology to banking to consultant to creating startups and sole businesses, and then World Economic Forums, and then activism. So I have a full range of professional hats. I would say that I'm more of a catalyst and an alchemist. And that's where I landed on seeds. And if you ask me why, I don't know. So I'm guided very much by this emergence, guided by very much trust and faith. Where I'm landing is where I am supposed to be. And it's about coming home to wholeness. And everywhere I land, it unfolds to coming home to wholeness. And Seeds is one of these cryptocurrency platform that I wasn't aware of. But then when I landed, it felt aligned to some of the beliefs that I have and some of the indigenous elders that has taught me about money, which is really flow, which is a flow of energy, a flow of gift and abundance that keeps circulating. So I was really, really in awe of all of the work that Seeds were doing, especially the people, and trying and experimenting in these days of something completely different against the mainstream. Like Buckminster Fuller always says, focus on co-creating a new system that becomes a dominant system and making the entrenched ones obsolete. So coming back to Alistair's comment about this is a social construct, we are co-creating together a more beautiful world that our hearts know is possible. And on that note, I will pass it back to Alistair.
But actually, I don't have anything else to say, but really to hand over to Franz. I'm so curious how you will sketch your way of making this human experience.
Thank you, Andre, sir. Thank you, Mila. It's good to be here with you both, sharing this time and bending the distances through technology. From my perspective, my journey, I relate a lot to what Mila was saying. I am a child, a product of third cultures, my mother being Guatemalan, my father being Austrian, and had a very unique opportunity to really live both sides of that culture and really question myself, what does it mean to be Guatemalan, and in that sense really be exposed to Mayan culture, of which I am part of, but really questioning how it's treated from the colonial point of view versus at the same time from an Austrian point of view, seeing what the values were there. So all throughout my early years, I was in a state of observing, but also not really understanding why are we all very similar in our universal needs, but very different in terms of cultures and how that had shaped us to have different perspectives. In my journey, somehow the things that were in that path were essentially trying to heal. And what I learned from culture at those times was study medicine. And I actually went on to study biomedical engineering, which is what I thought I could do to be able to bring, to alleviate a lot of the things that I was seeing. And in that journey, I also came across a lot of challenges when I started working, for example, with corporations or big multinationals like the World Health Organization, and really understanding what the role of that was. In one hand, I was seeing billions of dollars being moved around for bringing in pharmaceuticals, while at the same time I was very present with a notion that, with simply providing access to water, access to food, we could alleviate a lot of those things. So there was a huge disconnect in that journey that triggered me to really question how our monetary systems are wired, how they're organized, and why is it that it is like that. In this journey, I was also meeting a lot of organizations and individuals who were inspired by a healthier world and were against all odds doing incredible things. But I always was very present with the notion that even though there's a lot of these small organizations doing wonderful things, they're still fragmented. And that also sparked a very deep question in me: how can we actually bring all of these impulses and channel them towards shared purpose? Because the shared purpose was clear, but somehow in one way, whether it's legal jurisdictions, monetary jurisdictions, they were fragmented. So that was my career in that context. And at some point, I came across blockchain, in that time Bitcoin, and that was for me an eye-opening epiphany to realize that through this distributed technology, we could essentially reflect values that were more universal. And at that time, it was Bitcoin, but that technology has come a long way now, that we're able to really mirror what we see is more in reflection to what the natural abundance of our surroundings really are, and have that mirrored through the technology. And that also made me back to reflect to my Mayan Guatemalan roots as well, to really see, okay, there's indigenous cultures all across the planet that have been aligned and consistently protecting the environment, consistently protecting the sacred, and holding up for resisting all of this colonial takeover in terms of culture and monetary. And that was essentially an awakening. And that's also what drove us to co-create what Seeds is. So joining efforts across the ecosystem for shared purpose, and really find ways to repurpose what value means, and doing it in a way that can really transition the rest of the world towards a healthier way of relating with one another, with our world around us, and with ourselves. Because that's what sort of debt-based currency and trickle-down economics has moved us away from, a separation of ourselves and a separation away from nature.
So I already saw almost landing some of the hashtags and buzzwords. So I would like us to unpack some of these buzzwords. So blockchain, Bitcoin as the, let's say, first visible artifact on a blockchain, but also where that has moved. Kind of a very quick, maybe 5-minute run through to then land what actually the underlying technology and the tokenization of the different, in my language, multiple capitals can be turned into an engine for a regenerative renaissance, both on a money system, but also including all these different capitals that we usually are not aware of unless we study macroeconomics or something the like. So Franz, could you give, I know you were in Miami just a couple of days ago on this huge conference, maybe you could sketch this, let's say, evolution 1, 2, and 3 of blockchain technology, and where basically this is only starting to unlock the potential now.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's we're all alive during a great transition, and this great transition is powered by this incredible technology of blockchain, which in simple terms is a distributed ledger that allows us to exchange value or create smart contracts that don't need an intermediary. And that, in a world of middlemen and intermediaries, is revolutionary. Credit where credit is due. Bitcoin was one of the first technologies that was able to really showcase the value of all of this, and started off also with a essentially what is seen now as a digital gold, where the value has gone in merely 10 years from a few fractions of a cent to today around $60,000, simply through this digital money, which at first people were very, very skeptical about, but today it has already changed the very foundations of how people see money and made a lot of people wealthy. Credit where it's due, it's the grandfather of a lot of the currencies out there, and it already has created a movement in itself. But it doesn't end there. The generation or the development of the blockchain technology has evolved as well. So now we're able to create more complex financial systems that better reflect values across the ecosystem, and doing it also in technology that is much faster, much more scalable, faster transaction speeds, and also that consumes less energy or virtually no energy whatsoever. One of the other...
I would like, just for the sake of the audience, because I don't know how tiny the fraction of the energy consumption has become, because ultimately, I know only a week ago, it was like Sweden, big press report saying they wanted to ban Bitcoin mining. So I don't know if it's like 110,000% or 110,000,000%, but it's like, what's the fraction compared to first layer blockchain and now?
It's very interesting in terms of energy. So you could say the Bitcoin consumes the equivalent of the entire country, such as the size of Chile or Argentina. In comparison to the new blockchains today, for example, Telos, which is a fork of EOS, and that's the technology where Seeds is built on, consumes a yearly ratio of a household, of a simple household. So it's orders of magnitude different. And also to give a little bit of insight into words that critique blockchain, yes, on Bitcoin, yes, it does consume a lot of energy, but it's not the inherent root of the problem. So right now, for example, we see countries like El Salvador already using hydrothermal energy from volcanoes to mine the Bitcoin. So again, this energy mass consumption is mainly a repercussion of the centralized financial systems. Because if the energy systems were distributed in decentralized, there will also be no question about the energy. Technically, there's more than enough energy to supply everyone's needs. It's just that it's still centralized.
Okay. So let's continue educating us and the audience with us. One of the things after, I was able to decipher reading books and articles from, distributed ledger technology, and then Bitcoin being the first artifact, kind of the first monetary system still in place and working. Let's see where that goes. What are, besides monetary systems, other ways where actually distributed ledger technology is uniquely fit for purpose and not just like a add-on because it's fancy to sell or something like that?
Yeah, essentially every industry today is being reimagined through the blockchain, whether it is logistics, whether it is the banking sector, whether it is agriculture. Everything that requires trust and a system for transparency and fast storage and distribution of information can be done through the blockchain technology. So you can imagine medical information systems. It's in another way, simple way to see it is the evolution of the internet, where value or anything that goes into your internet can be claimed by the individual who creates it and is able to be monetized in a larger ecosystem.
I would like to ask you, Mila, a question and paraphrase it. For me, one of the most exciting things about distributed ledger technology is that I have the feeling that we can again lean into trust that's not built on a one-to-one relationship, but instead of more like in an ecosystemic view to a multi actor point of view. And I would like just to lean in your thoughts of how that intersects not only with your own upbringing, but also with the different indigenous cultures that you're working with.
Yes, so from an indigenous point of view, there's something called Indigenous AI platform, where it's marrying the blockchain to AI and indigenous wisdom. So to your point about trust, it's about relationship in indigenous and collectivist kind of community. So it's collective and connection. So, and that connection, as you said, is not one-to-one, it's connection with all sentient beings, which is not just the humans, but all the surrounding. Even in indigenous words and verbs, they only use verbs mostly, not nouns. So it could be Sunday is being, or air is being. There's no the air. Air walks, air runs, river walks. So in that way, everything is all about character-based relationship. So it's all about trust. And it's because there's so much relationship to trust to the land, trust to the country, trust to the tribe, or even trust to just spirit, right? So all the different dimensions. It's all relational. There's nothing that is separate. And so this way of being in the blockchain is almost like it is a transition mechanism to go back to our deep roots of connection and relationship and trust. And it is deep local engagement. So it's funny because that is cryptocurrency. The blockchain platform is on an internet that is global, but yet it's bringing all of us back to deep local engagement and relationship and trust. And I think over time, that transition will make itself to come back to ourselves, to where we used to be, our ancestors. That's how they connected with every sentient being.
I want to riff off something that's the beautiful thing about an emergent dialogue about my language. German language is my mother tongue, obvious, right? With the brutal accent, is a very much a language consisting of nouns and objects in my brain that co-constructs the way how I perceive reality. And much like you were saying, there are languages, especially, let's say, the less used ones, so still the existing indigenous languages that primarily rely on the relationship in between things and the process level. I just wanted to mention that and throw the question to you, Franz, because how could just as a first way to dive into tokenomics, how could a system support more a relationship view of how we relate and create value instead of just the transactional relationship?
Great question. And I think the best way to answer that or to make that lucid is essentially compare the current system and how that actually creates that element of separation, and how a redefinition of another one would be much the logical and heartfelt space. So for example, what we're talking about language, where right now we have an incentive for monoculture in everything that we see. Why is that so? Because our financial system is structured in a way where, for example, currency is created centrally, meaning there is a handful of individuals that decide what the values are for the entirety of the planet. And you can merely say that probably these people don't have an understanding of the intrinsic value of this multitude of cultures and multitude of diversity that uphold the entire well-being of the planet. And another factor of our current dominating system is, first of all, currency is centrally created, and also then how it's distributed is distributed through trickle-down economics, where a central bank creates not actually money, it actually creates debt. So it's actually a compounded debt that is trickled down through a pyramid scheme of a format. And you can imagine that by the time that debt product reaches the bottom of the pyramid, that energy that we're exchanging has an immense vacuum, an energetic vacuum that requires the users to transform living capital, whether it is nature, whether it is our culture, whether it is spirit, into mere paper money. That's why, for example, in this paradigm, it's much more valuable to have an ecosystem of a forest be cut down and transformed into paper money than it is to sustain it as such. And you can also see why there's intrinsic incentives, for example, to even create diseases in which there are then the remedies from the same organization, because then it becomes a circular economy of value extraction under a debt-based economy that has this immense vacuum. But all in all, what this has energetically programmed into it is essentially fear of scarcity. So all of that creates an artificial scarcity that makes natural resources more scarce, and the more scarce it is, the more value it has. That's why we have created a rampage of destruction all around us, whether it is in culture, whether it is in language, whether it is in nature. All of that is right now at the very ends of what can be destroyed, and that's what's really pulling us to transition. And this artificial scarcity also creates this separation, because it really puts us in a state of artificial competition with one another, because we are competing against each other for the same scarce resources that are not really scarce. They're actually just made scarce by the financial system. And now you can imagine how a flip model would be. Essentially, all of that flipped on its head. What happens if at the other side of the money creation, it's the citizens of the planet, people like you and I, who together understand that 1 + 1 is 2, but it also is much more than that. It also is entire value of ecosystem. What happens if we bring the biologists, the indigenous wisdom? What happens if we meet the scientists? What happens if we meet the people with so much skill sets and put them behind the wheel of the money creation, and also put them behind the wheel of how the money is distributed? Once you do that, you unlock essentially a financial system that has more value, not just in financial value, but also in all forms of capital, that is better distributed and allows us to really achieve our commonly shared goals.
Let's put that as a big disclaimer for the next. I felt the energy already, looking too much in the crumbling paradigm. So disclaimer for everybody watching or hearing: we're truly listening into, leaning into, sensing into the birthing of a currency, but not only a currency. Let's call it more a social organism within which also the currency is one organ, but where through tokenomics also different capitals, social capital, cultural capital, intellectual capital, can be valued, measured, and contributed to the system. So again, the disclaimer is truly, you could work with seeds, for seeds, do a strategic alliance with seeds, or inject some of your other tokens, whatever the tokens are, into the system. At the same time, spur the system, but be part of the system. So it's really a very interesting paradigm, and I have the feeling there will be more examples like seeds, but for the sake of the exercise and for today, to not overcomplicate the matter, let's stay with seeds. So imagine, Mila, let's do it very hands-on, okay? Like, what is tokenomics? Mila wants to contribute something to seeds. What could she do? And how would that essentially look like? So if Mila were not to inject some of her other crypto tokens, into seeds. Very hands-on.
Yeah, so for example, I think Mila would be able to better elucidate herself in her journey coming into seeds. But essentially, in this paradigm, every human has an intrinsic value, and every human is seen as a carrier of a gift. And what we're doing is aligning that gift, that passion, with finance, because we know that when human beings are living in their highest form and contributing that from a place of abundance, we know that the outcome is much orders of magnitude higher quality than it is if they're just working to pay their bills. And with that sort of concept, we are really able to give value to this multiple forms of capital, like you're saying. Like you can imagine, for example, from an indigenous point of view, as an example, in Guatemala, there are midwives, spiritual midwives, and currently they have had an incredible hard time, almost to the point that knowledge of culture has actually been extinct, because they have been trying to sell that wisdom, which shouldn't be commodified, in a system where they need money just in order to survive. So now we can create models where, for example, the community itself defines what roles need to be taken in account. So you can set up structures like universal earned income, where this esteemed members of a community can continue contributing with their gifts to the whole and earn a fair wage for that, not having to commodify that. That's an example. And I think I will pass it on to Mila to really share her journey in terms of what amazing things she's done already so far, contributing to the community, and how that came about.
Thank you, Franz. So part of when you arrive, you're already harvesting what we call plants, and you're harvesting seeds for the future, for the whole ecosystem, not just yourself. So when you onboard, but then as you go in, what matters most to you, what you are passionate about, you get involved in all of these different projects and initiatives that is so, I would say, so inspiring and self-organizing. And it's up to you how you want to show up. But then when you show up, it's not like the existing system where you volunteer, right? You are valued not only in the terms of the currency of seeds, but you are valued with the people who wants to work with you. And you have multiple purposes that you can be, just like in nature, just like in life, where, a flower or the heart has different functions, but then you can connect with another kind of ecosystem of people doing things, but then still valued. And you have like basic income monthly that you get by just showing up to contribute your ideas, and it's valued rather than just going into meetings for hours and hours and just hot air. The other part of the work that Seeds have done brilliantly is looking at how do we vote for campaigns that are doing regenerative projects on the ground. So it's not just digitally. And then at the same time, anytime that maybe just myself and Franz is saying, hey, Franz, what you did to me, you said something nice, you shared something with me, an article, I can send gratitude to Franz. And it's not just gratitude by, hey, I want to thank you, Franz, but I can send seeds to Franz. So it's the seeds of planting value, the seeds of also taking care of each other. So that's where the trust is built. And that the blockchain follows that through, and it's transparent to all of us. So we know what the relationship exchanges, and I'm avoiding transaction in that.
My gut feeling is, again, disclaimer for the audience, let's pull that from our discussion onto the dashboard for some facts and figures. How many people are using this? What is actually happening? So we are basically looking inside of the live safe, for a lack of a better word, in a fully transparent ecosystem. This again, I find like hugely attractive. So instead of everybody hiding and obviously not paying taxes in the Panama Papers and Paradise Papers and where not, is actually the exact opposite. In the dashboard, you're basically looking at the different organs of what makes up this, again, social construct, which is seeds, within which the currency part plays a very core part. So without further ado, I will simply screen share the dashboard, and I'm super curious to listen in to Franz, explaining some of the core functionalities there. And for the people with audio only, I will share the link in the written document so you can simply click on it.
Thanks, Alistair. Yeah, this is the seeds dashboard that elucidates what's going on in the ecosystem in real time. So you could imagine the equivalent of a central bank telling you its metrics, its numbers, and where the funds are going in near to real time. And right now we've launched this a few weeks back, so it's still on improvement. But on the top, you can see the number of people that are already in the ecosystem, which we are around approaching 10,000 total. And we have 3 layers of individuals. People can come up as a visitor, where they're getting to know an ecosystem after they receive an invite. Once they've been able to showcase that they understand the ecosystem, they become a resident. And after a process, they also are becoming citizens. And what it means to become a citizen is that you have full voice in the governance and evolution of this financial system. So you can see it as a decentralized First Nation with local roots, but at the same time, a digital global encompassing. We are also seeing...
Let's stay on the upper left, right? And I hope for the people with the audio only, they can follow. So it's basically 3 levels of interaction. And where I think it becomes really interesting is that you're not invited into something that just exists up until the end of time. Like, this is compound interest rate. Okay, with your money, we're doing XYZ, destroying the environment, inevitably, right? Or we're exporting weapons, Germany being a major weapon exporter or something like that. But you're actually also invited, once you qualify for it, to change with your contribution and your voting power, basically the way the whole system works. Could you explain that a little bit further, how that works?
Yeah. So when you receive an invite, you come in as a visitor. And once you are part of that, you become a citizen, which means that you have full voting rights towards where the funds, the seeds are distributed in the ecosystem. Meaning that right now, as we speak, we have projects from all around the world who are requesting seeds to make their regenerative projects come to life. And every citizen is able to vote on that every lunar cycle. And that's also when you see on next to the upper left, you see the waxing gibbous. These are the lunar cycle right now where we are. So if you guys are able to see the night sky right now, you can see, and that's the phase of the moon. So with the seeds ecosystem, as compared to our current financial system, we're talking about how money is created or when money is created. Currently today, if let's say like right now I'm in the US, the Federal Reserve, when do they create money? Whenever there's a need to fund a war, whenever there's a need to fund the petrochemical industry, all of that, and that happens nearly arbitrarily, whenever this people decide. So what we needed in the seeds ecosystem is a universal timekeeping mechanism for this distribution of value and the creation of value too. So for example, every lunar cycle, each proposal that goes in requesting seeds stays up for an entire lunar cycle. And at the end of that lunar cycle, according to the validations of the boats, if it passes, the accounts requesting those funds to make regenerative projects come to life automatically receive that funding. So just to translate it in this ecosystem, every citizen of seeds is essentially, like, you could describe it as a financial minister into an ecosystem. into a decentralized nation. Here you can see the next voting cycle begins in 16 days. We also have different landmarks for in terms of how much people are going through the different visitors or resident process, where we're trying to optimize it right now. And we also have, for example, an ambassador academy that whenever new people come into this ecosystem, they get received by the community and unlearn a lot of the conditioning from the old system and relearn just different ways of actually creating value and exchanging value, where you as a human being have direct value and direct voice into the system that you inhabit. So for a lot of people, as you can imagine, it's a completely new imagining of how things are organized. On the bottom, you also see the current value of seeds where we are in. So right now we have one seed is around 10 cents of a dollar. And what we're doing right now as we build trust across the ecosystem is we're together growing the value of seeds. As more people use it and demand it, there is less of the total seeds pot available, which means that the value goes up. And what we're doing right now altogether is creating value so that the value of seeds goes up to $1. And from that place, we call the harvest. I think Mila touched briefly on that harvest, and that's also one of the key elements of what seeds is. And we also call it go live or go stable. So right now you have this inflation rate of the value of seeds with the purpose that we're actually competing neck to neck against the petrodollar. We don't want to be another Bitcoin that goes up to $60,000 or another tool of speculation. We want to be the ideal medium of exchange for everyday use. And again, to the power of blockchain, what we're able to do for the first time in human history is really measure the velocity of money in an ecosystem. And what we're able to do is once we kick in the harvest protocols, we're going to be able to create as much currency as there is demand for exchange. This creates supply-demand homeostasis, meaning that seeds as a currency will retain its value across time. In a world where all of the other currencies are depreciating or losing value at staggering rates, just as an example, I think the U.S. Federal Reserve created in 1 year 30% of all the dollars that have been created in the entire history of the US, meaning that all the people who are holding dollars right now are feeling this massive hyperinflation, which is only going to get much worse. So what seeds is also is a way to offer people with value a stable way to retain that value across time and also contribute to a sustainable environment that enables you to use that money. Because in a world where the environment is no longer functional, even if you have hoarded billions or trillions of dollars, you won't even be able to use it.
Franz, let's stay for maybe some more minutes on the high level. What I find really interesting in the conversations we shared is, and what you also just mentioned a minute ago, is like you're basically trying to protect the currency against speculation. And without me wanting to point the finger against what people are doing, so far, I see most of the cryptocurrencies out there, not saying all, but most of the cryptocurrencies out there used as a means of speculation for people basically injecting fiat money, whatever that is, euro, yuan, US dollars, Schweizer Franken, and really like partaking in just more casino capitalism. So why are you trying to protect seeds against speculation, and how are you doing that?
Great question. Yeah, that's definitely what differentiates us from a lot of what we see out there, And it's worth noticing that the key factor in this ecosystem is that the vast majority of seeds are not for sale. And with the intention that big whales, like how they've done in in Bitcoin or other currencies that, if you have incredible amount of money, you can essentially buy in and already influence the whole market and already play with it. So the vast majority of seeds are not for sale. They're only be able to earn through contributions, really through earn drops, meaning whether it is campaigns for growing your own food, for permaculture, for good deeds get seeds, for example, for actual contributions that, as Mila was saying, that create a positive relation between our community or nature. That's how seeds are earned. And in that context, we know that the value of seeds is much higher than any speculative medium of exchange. It has this intrinsic multidimensional power to it. That's also what a lot of people are recognizing, and it really creates a fair playing field, which is imperative in order for us to create a platform in which we are creating a transition for civilization and not just for a selected few.
Before I would like to embark on projects, Franz, and maybe also you, Mila, what would be a wild card? What would be a benevolent whale look like that says, okay, I want to support this, I want to help spread the world, I want to help scale it, 10x it, and he basically gives you his checkbook and says, okay, do you need 1 million? Do you need 10 million? Do you need 100 million? What would happen?
Great question.
Can I
Go
just
for it, Mila.
answer quickly? So I just want to take a step back of what Franz said about protection. I would add stewardship. So basic, all of us are not just finance ministers, but we are also stewards of the whole ecosystem. And it's not just the platform digitally, but also locally, because it's all about the value that needs to be circulated and the shared prosperity. And that can only happen if it's circulated and it's not hoarded in one. So coming back to your question, Alistair, with that role of guardian and steward, each one of us, there's such a level of care, and it's all about the relationship. So in order for, it's just like a mycelium network. So if there was a multi-billion dollar, I would say don't invest on projects, invest on guilds or a small ecosystem that are interdependent of each other, because that strengthens the network. And the potential of the progress and success of that has higher possibility and viability, and it's regenerative rather than just one project that has a self-interest. But also the fact that that ecosystem or guild, that is a component of different initiatives coming together or people coming together, not only are they serving interdependently to each other in order to basically manifest value for the investor in a way that is throughout the ecosystem, not just for them, because by the working of their interaction, it will give a value to the higher ecosystem that they serve, as well as the ecosystem that is under that they inhibit. And the easiest to give you an example is the heart and the liver and the kidney have very unique function. But when they come together, the optimum of our body is at the optimum possibility of its well-being. And it's serving the higher ecosystem that is beyond their own interaction, which is the body. If the body dies, all of the organs die. So if we could, not if, we are doing it right now. We're actually role modeling, experimenting together this way of being that our ancestors had, and it's remembering by actually doing this. And that's what Seeds platform for me is actually has an intention. And I would say not just protect, I would say it's stewardship for not just this generation, but for many, many generations to come in a regenerative way. Over to you, Franz.
No, I have the feeling I want to kind of if the whole dialogue is like an airplane, let's land it for a moment. So
Okay.
imagine somebody becomes a visitor and starts contributing, earning seeds. You have your passport on the smartphone. So have I. And I enter a country, let's say Guatemala. What can I do with the seeds earned? How many people are already using it? Can I really buy food? Can I stay over at some place and get a breakfast? I don't know, rent a bike, order a coffee. So how far is that evolved already now? But also what's like on the horizon one, meaning in a year or in 2 or 3 years, where then definitely towards the next minutes of our dialogue, I really want to embark on that like bigger vision where we want to go together.
Yeah. To answer your question, absolutely. What we have here is essentially a ecosystem of organization and individuals that already have direct incentives to accept seeds as a medium of exchange. So, as you say, when you land in Guatemala, you're able to find organizations who are there, and there's people who are actually looking to travel into a bioregion and commune with the people who are of that, share that ethos, share those values. So it actually becomes like a really way to cohere around people sharing the same principles. So you're able to navigate whether it is hotels that accept seeds, whether it is indigenous communities that are already growing their foods and vegetables. We have organic farms that are producing things like that. We have already universities that accept seeds as a medium of payment. And the vision is that you can essentially navigate across the world without even needing to touch fiat, that you can go from bioregional hub to bioregional hub, exchanging and sharing the ethos of a healthier living and in right relationship with community in place.
Okay, I need to play the devil's advocate, okay? So in my understanding, even in a, let's say, very positive development of the endeavor and other endeavors like seeds, because I want to make a point, it's not like a sales pitch for seeds. It's really just one of these beautiful examples where we do not only have a concept and an idea and 2.5 hippies sitting somewhere, but it's an already evolved ecosystem. You can click on the link, join seeds.earth, earn seeds, fly to Guatemala, buy bananas, stay over at a regional hub. In my understanding, in only a couple of years from now, since we now know that MasterCard and Visa are going to accept like Bitcoin, right? Most likely we will have like different, I don't have Bitcoins for political reasons, but this is a very, very personal Alistair thing, right? I have the feeling sometimes we most likely need to rely on fiat if it's like petrol-based products, or like I need to buy a laptop or something like that is connected through like very complex supply chains, whereas the things on the ground, so literally like the food, the things I drink, the water, but also like additional services. So like maybe a massage I'm booking in Berlin, or artists I'm paying in Berlin are paid in seeds. So could you sketch beyond the like we're taking over the world perspective? Where do you see that evolving in the next couple of years?
Yeah, so there's a lot of things to untangle from that question, and absolutely, we foresee an ecosystem of currencies with different means for different aspects of it. And like you're saying, for example, you cannot buy fuel with seeds right now. While we're also going back to your previous question is, for example, this benevolent whales. What we also have is a technology for the DAO. So you see seeds as a global currency that is better than free. That means you can compare it to PayPal or Visa, where you can transfer funds in a fraction of a second without being charged any fees, and instead of being charged fees, you receive harvest. But what's complementary to that is the DAO. So the DAO is another way to contextualize this trust building protocols, where you can also have other ways of tokenizing value. So what we're doing with the DAO technology is that people can invest into bioregional DAOs, which provide liquidity pools for people who are already handling with seeds. So that's, for example, we're doing that in other bioregions, where if someone is earning a universal earned income in seeds, they're able to exchange from their community treasury on a monthly basis a certain portion of their seeds back into fiat to perform purchases that they wouldn't be available just in the seeds economy. But what's very interesting is that then people start seeing really what value is and the advantages of having a better than free currency that you can transfer anywhere in the world under a fraction of a second without being charged fees, and creates a healthier environment for yourself and for your neighbors. Then people more and more start opting for that. And then simply the question that we mentioned before of inflation, where that, for example, fiat currency is incredibly losing value at the speed of hyperinflation versus a currency that is appreciating in value and remain stable, then it becomes clear options in terms of what every individual will start favoring more and more.
Mila, do you want to add something? If not, I would, yeah. So Franz, it's more than a seedling, but it's still a sprouting, vulnerable plant. So some facts and figures, like how many people are like active behind seeds, how many years did it take to build it, and like on your roadmap as an organization, what do you see are like realistically the next steps to unfold that or roll that out? And again, maybe just give a 1 to 3 year perspective before we again, jump on a higher plane for the bigger picture.
Yeah. So you could see, if you see seeds as an evolutionary organism, we're right now in a toddler phase, learning how to walk and learning how to stand, and already experimenting across multiple things. And as more and more people come to contribute, that toddler becomes stronger, because we're able to channel all of this knowledge and wisdom and ways of organizing and ways of creating value. In that context, since the launch of Seeds, which was 2 years ago, we have already gone from 0 to 600 organizations who are already signaling to be a part of this and want to contribute with their operations to help build this. And also already presence in more than 100 countries, where people are already also planting the seeds of a regenerative culture and a regenerative world, where they're also becoming the mappers of their ecosystem, identifiers of the pioneering organizations that share this ethos, and also then structuring and weaving together all of this. What I foresee is really in the next future is that more and more communities will come to place. Like, for example, right now with Mila, we're in conversations with Jen, the Regenerative Communities Network, and there's also a lot of eco-villages that are signaling to use our tools and are forming more and more stronger. And I think, what's very interesting to point out is this fork that is going right now in our civilization, where we have, when you see across the world, there's right now a push towards more centralized, more control. And at the same time, what's resulting from that is a counter movement of really connecting closer to nature and creating alternatives, ways of living. So to say that I can foretell the future in a couple days. It'll be very difficult, but I can tell you the best way to predict the future is to architect it. And you can count that there's a lot of humans out there who are architecting this with us, and the best is yet to come.
Let's stay with. I prefer this picture and metaphor of like different plants in the garden, and maybe like bees and different microclimates and the soil and the water it needs. So ultimately, sure, we know the garden needs all of it, but to stay where seeds is right now is like, what would help the overall ecosystem to stay in balance, but grow in terms of more people contributing? What is most needed at the moment? What nutrient, so to say?
Soil. We need to compost old world and recompose it into a new world. Essentially, that's the hardest part of all of this. What we're creating is really a new way of people interacting with one another. And what the biggest challenge there is the deconditioning from essentially thousands of years of scarcity mindsets. So that's also where we're counting on with our communities to really create ways of building trust and transition that. I think that's very, very important. And at the same time, a beautiful mission where it's all about raising consciousness and creating ways of being more resilient together and communing with one another. And from that, I think from this powerful place of empowerment between communities, all the other resources flow more abundantly too.
Yeah. So it's funny that I give myself a call to action, because I've never seen a jungle nor a coral reef, and Franz knows that I'm going to visit him in, I don't know, 6 weeks time or so, in Guatemala. I have the feeling my proof of concept, meaning Alistair's proof of concept, is bringing that to Berlin, because Berlin is a vibrant hub. There's a lot of cultural creatives. There's a lot of scarcity, really, of people. It's for all the listeners out there that don't know that Berlin is a poor place but sexy. Berlin is a poor place. Like, obviously not compared to third world countries, but within Europe. So a lot of people are really suffering and COVID hitting. So I'm truly interested how that social organism from a, let's say, eco-village lands into, in Berlin we call it Kiez, so I live in Prenzlauer Berg, which is close to Mitte, but has a completely different structure than like Kreuzberg or Neukölln or Pankow or Steglitz. So I'm really curious what's the best way to inject and invite people from these different parts in Berlin, and to turn that into a question both to you, Mila, and to you, Franz, is, are there already within seeds, but also maybe from other examples, processes or structures or metaphors where such a infusion happens differently depending on the cultural context, or rural to urban? Is there already something that we can see?
I can have a stab of that. And yes, this is essentially a whole systems transformation. And another way to put into perspective of what we're doing is this decentralization of abundance. And right now cities are also stifled with what you were saying, this scarcity, with this sort of over competition and fear of losing and really little access to some of our basic utilities. And that's one of our first target groups where a lot can be changed really quickly. And it doesn't matter, the level of financial capital in a place. We're able to really complement culture in ways that are incredibly unique. Even if you have, there's a saying, there's some people that are so rich that are so poor that all they have is money. And even in these jurisdictions, people are longing for more community, for healthier way of living, for ways that they can really find true belonging. And in that place, it's a matter of holding space uniquely for each state or city or village, and really doing it from a grassroots up. So essentially what we do is bringing together a stakeholder network from where you are, in this case Berlin, like all of the pioneers, people who are involved, the entrepreneurs, maybe members of the government, maybe some of the landholders, and really bring them together and together form a vision of what a more regenerative Berlin would look like. And once you do that and get people to dream, you can already start thinking about what roles you would envision. Some cities might identify that you need to do trash cleanup campaigns, or you might need to do some urban gardening to grow more food, to be more resilient, or you might have to employ other roles that are in relationship with the place, and you can already attribute a value to that and already set forth. And once you're able to showcase the value that's being done through seeds, then through the DAO technologies, this becomes a vehicle for collaborative impact investment. Like as Mila was saying, that then investors are not investing in a single organization claiming to do a siloed work. They're already investing in an ecosystem of organizations sharing that purpose. That then that lowers the risk of investment and makes sure that you're actually going to reach what you're doing. So there's an incredible room for opportunity to unleash those tools in places like Berlin too, and would be very happy to work with you to make that happen.
Can I add, Alistair? So just moving from the scarcity, it's really survival, what I'm hearing in Berlin, but it's also all over the world, in certain, especially because of COVID. But what I've seen on Seeds, just as a participant there, I've seen like places in Kenya, in Uganda doing this, where what matters most to them. So a whole group of people coming together and then expanding. And then I saw also in Portugal recently, so there was like 30 people, and there's this longing, if you feel it in the discussion, the longing of connecting and belonging and be part of a commons ecosystem, coming back to communing, like what Franz said. So it starts with what matters most in people. And we did this survey in Netherlands to like 10 cities with 1,000 people from all over all walks of life. And the key thing when we asked that question, what matters most, was connection. And fundamentally, it starts from that. And then find as Franz says, the early adopters of change, or the pioneers of the heart, I call them, who already is looking, who's already experimenting. So there's not really that much of any promoting or influencing. They just want to experiment. Come and experiment with us and co-create it together with us. So it's a participative role. It's not, hey, you just become a customer of Seeds. It's a participative, co-creative role of how this moves forward and evolves together as a whole ecosystem.
Yeah, let's truly lean into that, because my understanding is from students of universities to bachelor and master degrees from various faculties, from people that reinvest parts of the money that they made with other cryptocurrencies. I have the feeling that there's a place for many of them, because I have the feeling some people might want to contribute more through, let's say, the doing aspect, let's say, partaking in the voting mechanisms and such stuff like that, but also truly others really want to help with cryptocurrencies or like real, whatever the real is in fiat money, but like, let's say, like with real fiat money. What would happen if we were to try and directly connect it to a bigger ecosystem? So you were talking about like global eco-villages network. Let's stay with that example. I don't know how many thousands of eco-villages are connected through global eco-villages network, but thousands, right? So would the structure of seeds in its current technological development be able to hold whatever 500 eco-villages suddenly want to work on the seeds infrastructure within a year's time?
Absolutely. So that would mean, essentially every eco-village designing what they need in currency to give value to whatever it is they're doing, and they would do the self-mapping. So all they would need to do is request it from the citizens of seeds, from which the citizens of seeds would then vote if that gives value to the whole ecosystem or not. And in this case, obviously it would, and that value is shared across the ecosystem through that token of a seed, which we all co-create on. And that's the spirit of it, that we can really accelerate the transition. And that's why I'm also very grateful for you, Alistair, to giving us a space here, because all it needs to do is trickle in terms of the knowledge of what's there, really go penetrate this layer of information and allow voices like ours to be heard. And that really has deep resonances in terms of who can reach and how fast it can. The tools are already there. All we need to do is build a capacity for us to use them, as I was mentioning before.
Yeah, I have the feeling like when I sense into the energy in between the three of us is like trying to find good ways to wrap it up. And maybe I start when I'm 42. And I think my first touch on money truly was through the Bible. So I come from an agnostic household, and then I wanted to serve in church. I don't know, what my parents were thinking. And I read the Bible, and Jesus being kind of my childhood hero. And later on in my life, I discovered that compound interest rate thing. And I think this was really one of the first big aha moments, so I understand like the interest rate, but not the compound interest rate. And then later, when I was studying macroeconomics and alternative currencies and like complementary currencies, but it was just printed paper, it was just books, just ideas. And what I truly found fascinating discovering seeds is that it already is an organism with, I don't know, how many people are in the core team? 50, 60, 70 people, 60 or something like that? Franz? I mean, I know everybody's contributing, but...
Yeah, there's different ways to see it. So, for example, the organization that created seeds, so that the technological organization is called HIFA, and there's by now at some point we were almost 80 contributors to building that, and that's sort of like the initial layer of coherence. From that, now it has already diversified. So right now there's multiple DAOs giving value to multiple aspects of the movement. For example, there's a Star DAO that's already facilitating people to onboard into the new DAOs. There's a Mom DAO that is focusing on land trusts and holding land. So yeah, if you count that, or you count also the numbers of people within those organizations, we could already reach hundreds of thousands of people that are on the verge of being activated to contribute towards that.
Yeah, beautiful. So maybe before I hand over again, my beautiful picture of the future would be that I, as Alistair, can decide how much money I need to earn in fiat currency. And I'm also fine to earn some in fiat currency. I'm not against it totally. It's not. I'm not complaining about paying taxes and want to avoid the taxes in the German system. For example, kind of a beautiful layer of a welfare state, right? So as I'm for that, but I'm not against a lot of exporting weapons and stuff like that in the German system. So my way for myself is that I truly want to earn and contribute towards that birthing of new monetary systems and social organisms. And I'm really excited on that journey and actually looking forward to my first, then like life exchange, much like that Bitcoin pizza, 10,000 Bitcoin for 2 pizzas, right? And later on, the 2 pizzas were worth 140 million. I just heard that I don't know, a couple of days ago. So maybe handing over to either you, Mila, or you, Franz, just for some closing words, maybe ending with a metaphor.
I can go first, and no, first of all, thank you for the opportunity, and super grateful for the exchange that we had here. And my reminder is also, what I want to work with is to contribute towards a healthier planet, and that comes on with myself as well as an individual, but with that understanding that abundance is already here. And when we step away from what we've been taught to believe what abundance really is, then there is much more joy and much more things to share with one another than it is from what we're already believing. And another layer, the value in nature, really, the value is abundance as revealed for the whole. So it really comes to what we can do as a community, as an ecosystem for one another, and that's where true value can be unlocked. And if you have a currency that really gives value to those exchanges, it is orders of magnitude more valuable than what we've ever come with fiat. When we start tapping into the velocity of money, velocity exchange, what we can really do is when everyone becomes billionaires and trillionaires, that's the world I want to live in, and that's what we're working towards building.
Thank you, Alistair and Franz. It's a joy to be sharing this space with both of you. And thank you, Alistair, for your very insightful questions. I love them. It makes us think. So for me, it's similar to what Franz has said. And it's really, if we align to the wisdom of life, living system, nature, that's been around billions of years before us, I don't think we would go wrong. And it's coming back home to wholeness, right? Because life and nature is wholeness. And it reminds me of, I come from Indonesia, and in Bali, there's a saying, Tri Hita Karuna, which means abundance is sort of the 3 causes of well-being is relationship with your fellow beings, relationship with nature, and relationship with divinity. And divinity here is God in this, thank you for sharing that. It's really all life forms, and I stand for all life forms beyond just my lifetime, because that is abundance. Living this planet better than I came in. That is what abundance means to me.
Yeah, I have the feeling Maybe the call to action, the simplest one, is if anyone out of the audience, either watching or listening, with only 2 links, please forgive us for the live screen, mode, looking at the picture and the dashboard. I can only say, I want to invite you to experiment joining and contributing to Seeds, because there's so many beautiful ways to interact with the ecosystem. And secondly, also reach out to us personally. I mean, we're connected with the full name, so basically on all social media platforms you can connect to us: LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, whatever serves best your purpose. And having said all of that, I feel like ending like a metaphor. So I come from an kind of left-wing activist background household. And it's for the first time since a couple of years, I truly feel tailwind. Might be very subjective, but I have the feeling that the old system is crumbling down so fast that all these beautiful initiatives like the one sketched today are really getting support also from like unlikely allies, the benevolent whales, right? That do not even want to take over the system that they want to explore and help sprout and blossom. Yeah, maybe that was my last poetic whale words. Mila, Franz, I'm looking forward to getting our hands dirty with the humus and the compost. Thanks to Great Britain, Mila. Thanks to Franz. Where are you, Franz?
I'm in Florida right now, but going back to Guatemala tomorrow or the day after.
Beautiful. Thanks so much for the time spent. Thanks. Ciao.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.